Hate speech, I think, is when people
I have no idea.
You know what hate speech is?
Nope.
Isn't that when somebody hates to give speeches?
Or even with food, you could hate food.
Hate speech is when a person uses their words, written or spoken, to hurt others about their race or their lifestyle or their culture or religion or whatever.
I would think if you target a particular group because of their difference.
Using aspects of people's identity as a cudgel against their humanity and individuality and inherent worth.
It's intended to make the person feel less than him, or for him to feel better or superior in intellect and in looks or ethnicity or any other way that they feel they can look superior.
Prejudice, bias, racism, and class superiority are ingrained within U.S. society, deeply rooted in our economics and politics. As a condition of this, some Americans use hate speech in an attempt to maintain superiority over other groups. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution protects speech and press. This means that opinions, ideas, protests, grievances, and most of any other expressions of language can be shared freely without the fear of legal repercussions. The use of hate speech or threatening commentary, which expresses prejudice against a particular group, has been limited in certain ways by the Supreme Court.
We do not honor nor do we promote or accept hate speech in any form, and those who embrace it poison our public discourse, and they damage the very country that they claim to love.
In 1942, the Supreme Court first deliberated on the constitutionality of prohibiting hate speech with the case of Beauharnais v. Illinois. Joseph Beauharnais petitioned Chicago government officials to prevent the enroachment, harassment, and invasion of white people by African Americans. He publicly circulated leaflets containing his petition, which called whites to unite against the violence of African Americans. The content was considered extreme racial and religious propaganda. He was convicted under a state law that prohibited libel against any class of citizens of a certain race, color, creed, or religion if it might cause unrest.
I think politicians can be instrumental in transferring something like that exists kind of low-key under the radar into something that expresses itself verbally and sometimes even violently. So if I'm not mistaken, there's been a fairly large uptick of hate-induced violent crime, for example, against Latinos or gay people or what have you in the last 3 years, much more than you saw before that. And I think part of that is because that has now become more acceptable in the political class. And so people who once, understood that they need to kind of keep that tamped down are letting that run free. And I think it can be very dangerous for people.
Less than 10 years after the decision in Beauharnais v. Illinois, the court looked at Terminello v. Chicago. Father Arthur Terminello gave a speech which criticized various political and racial groups, as well as condemned a group of protesters outside. Terminello was ultimately convicted under a breach of peace law. However, this conviction was overruled by the Supreme Court, as they saw the law as an infringement of one's freedom of speech. The Supreme Court later protected the burning of a cross on an African American's lawn in Rav v. City of St. Paul in 1992 and the public burning of a cross in Virginia v. Black in 2003. Speech has been protected from punishment by law in many cases. However, social norms and morals should serve as regulators.
Hate speech is the tool of the privileged, used to perpetuate control and solidify social standing.
Words are powerful enough to spark movements and crimes. Hate speech encouraging the discrimination of groups reinforces the idea that it's acceptable to take part in such actions.
America prides itself on being the land of the free, home of the brave. If that's the case, Americans should be brave enough to confront anybody threatening our freedom to be ourselves.
Although the United States does not have any specific hate speech laws intact, it should never be acceptable to hate on someone for any reason.
We enjoy freedom of speech and press under the First Amendment. It is the responsibility of all Americans enjoying this freedom to educate themselves on the impact of hate speech and to treat others with respect. Freedoms like ours are not afforded to all human beings, so it is important to appreciate them for the privilege that they are. Hate speech that causes another individual grief, anger, or fear is simply abusing our privilege.